Tom never cared for animals. To him, they were a nuisance, messy, loud, and always in the way. While his neighbors left out food for the strays that roamed the neighborhood, Tom only saw them as pests. He hated the way they lingered near his apartment building, weaving between people's legs, meowing for scraps. One cat in particular irritated him the most. She was small and thin, her golden eyes too intelligent for comfort. Unlike the other strays who would scatter when shooed away, this one stood her ground. She watched him whenever he walked past, sitting near the entrance of his building as if she belonged there. It unnerved him. At first, he just ignored her, but as the weeks passed, she became bolder. She would brush against his legs when he left for work. She would sit near his car, her eyes locked onto his as he turned the ignition. Even in the evenings, when he closed the blinds, he sometimes caught a glimpse of her shadow outside. It felt like she was always there, watching. One night, as Tom returned home in a bad mood, the cat was curled up near the building's entrance, trying to stay dry from the heavy rain. She meowed softly as he approached. Something in him snapped. "Get lost," he growled, raising his foot. Before she could react, he kicked her, sending her tumbling into the darkness. She let out a sharp yowl of pain before scrambling away into the alley. Tom scoffed and shook his head. "Stupid cat," he muttered, stepping inside. He didn't think about her again. He should have. The haunting begins. The next morning, Tom awoke to an odd sound, scratching at his window. He groaned, rubbed his eyes, and pulled back the curtains. His stomach twisted. The golden-eyed cat was staring at him from the fire escape, but she wasn't alone. Behind her, perched on the railing, were at least half a dozen other strays, watching, silent, still. A chill ran down his spine. He waved his hands, trying to scare them off. They didn't move. Not one of them flinched. Brushing off the unease, he grabbed his coat and left for work. But the moment he stepped outside, he saw them again. Cats, everywhere, on rooftops, on fences, sitting beneath streetlights. Their glowing eyes followed him as he walked. He tried to shake the feeling, telling himself it was just his imagination, but then he reached his car. His heart stopped. The hood was covered in scratches, thin, sharp claw marks running across the metal like something had been trying to get in. His hands clenched into fists. "Damn cats," he muttered, kicking the front tire in frustration. But as he drove to work, something gnawed at him. The stray cat had never had a pack before. She was always alone. So why were there so many now? The signs grow worse. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences escalated. His garbage bags were shredded, their contents scattered across his doorstep. The food in his fridge was knocked over as if something had crawled inside. Even the bread he had just bought was torn apart, tiny claw marks covering the plastic. He double-checked his doors and windows, locked, secure. Then how? One night he was jolted awake by a sound, a low, eerie yowling that seemed to echo through the walls. He sat up, heart pounding. Slowly, he crept toward the window and peered outside. His breath caught in his throat. The street was lined with cats. Dozens, maybe even hundreds. They sat perfectly still, their golden eyes glowing in the darkness. Not a single one moved, not a single one blinked. A sick feeling curled in his stomach. He closed the curtains, his hands trembling. He barely slept that night. The next morning, he ran into his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, the kind woman who always left out food for the strays. She watched him with knowing eyes. "You don't look so good, Tom," she said. He let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, well, I've been dealing with a cat problem." Mrs. Holloway tilted her head. "Oh." His jaw clenched. "There's this one, a golden-eyed one. It won't leave me alone. And now there are more. They're everywhere." She studied him for a moment before saying softly, "It's best not to be cruel to those who have nothing, dear. They remember." Her words sent an uneasy shiver down his spine. The final warning. That night, Tom packed his bags and fled. But as he stepped outside, he froze. Cats lined the sidewalk, fences, and rooftops, silently watching. Then, one by one, the streetlights flickered out. Panicked, Tom ran and never looked back. By morning, he was gone. Mrs. Holloway simply smiled and tossed a piece of fish to the golden-eyed cat. "Good girl," she whispered.